A review of Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, written by Nate Fortner. I'm convinced that the Bible writer must have not had an eraser as he wrote, "The love of money is the root of all evil." Over the course of time and translation, it is obvious that the word love has been mistaken for lack. Surely he meant the lack of money is the root of all kinds of evil. All throughout Scripture we read where a man is to work and provide for his family. A man must work to earn a living, and that, in most cases, means acquiring money. We also read in the Scriptures that a man who doesn't provide for his family is worse than an infidel. One biblical story that truly stands out to me is the parable of the talents that Jesus taught in Matthew 25:14 through 30. You can clearly see upon reading this set of Scripture that the lazy servant was punished. It wasn't his love for that one coin that got him in trouble, but it was his lack of production. He was overtaken by fear of failure, and his lack of action brought about his demise. In Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, I learned many lessons. The poor and the middle class work for money, while the rich have money working for them. The poor and middle class acquire liabilities they think are assets, while the rich acquire assets, thus making them richer. Assets will make you money, while liabilities will cost you money. While the poor and middle class focus on their paychecks, the rich focus on their assets. Financial struggle is often the result of people working all their lives for someone else. I remember to this day growing up in West Virginia, my dad would say, "You'll never get rich working for someone else." In Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I also learned that having my business set up as a corporation versus a sole proprietorship, I can have tax advantages. According to Robert Kiyosaki, the single most powerful asset we have is our mind. He believes that if trained well, it can create enormous amounts of wealth. Failure is part of the process. People who avoid failure also avoid success. The main reason why people are unsuccessful is their fear of failure and rejection. Robert Kiyosaki. When I wrote and published my first book, Teaching Christians to Pray the Bible Way, I felt as though the world was against me. I came under attack by a few people in my life. They couldn't get over the fact that I thought I was smart enough or good enough to write a book. I actually went into a deep, dark depression for many months during this season of my life. There was more to the story than just those attacks of those I thought were my friends, but that's a whole nother story for another time. I became so fearful, and I felt like I was being rejected by those I loved. Through this part of my life, I developed a backbone and a mindset to win. Needless to say, I came out on top. I mention this because I was unsuccessful at anything I tried to accomplish during this part of my life. I had become full of the fear of rejection. Failure inspires winners, and failure defeats losers. Is such a powerful statement by Robert Kiyosaki in the book. He also states in the book, the greatest secret of winners is that failure inspires winning. Thus, they're not afraid of losing. He says if you have any desire to be rich, you must focus. Far too often I've learned this next lesson firsthand. Our doubt paralyzes us. So many times in my mind, I've argued and fought with scenarios that never even manifested. Many times, I've played out the entire situation in my mind, and after allowing myself to be riddled with doubt and fear, my worst fears never even took place. I think the story of Colonel Sanders is truly inspirational. Even at the age of 66, after losing his job, he still pushed for success. Broke and collecting a Social Security check, he went on the road trying to sell his recipe for fried chicken. At an age where most would have accepted the circumstances and just lived out the rest of their days living off the government, he pushed forward. After being turned down a few dozen times, I'd have probably been ready to settle for defeat. However, Harlan Sanders kept on pushing until he had been turned down over 1,000 times before he was finally given a yes. This just goes to prove that age truly is just a number, and you're never too old to achieve greatness. How can I afford it versus I can't afford it? I can't afford it is a lazy man's answer for not being able to afford what he wants in life. When I started reading this chapter, I got excited because this is how I think every day. When I see something I want, I figure out in my head what I need to do in order to afford the item. How many ads do I need to sell? How many books will I need to publish? Or how many calls will I need to make? I don't look to borrow money. I look for ways to create money. One thing I'm glad I learned early in life is to get over fear and rejection. I've always wanted everyone to like me, but that will never happen. I used to let that bother me. But like Eleanor Roosevelt said, do what you feel in your heart to be right, for you'll be criticized anyway. What other people think of you doesn't matter. You must know who you are on the inside and do whatever it takes to make success a reality in your life. Another idea in the book that I really like is pay yourself first. I like money, and I love having money in the bank. People who say money won't make you happy obviously have never had enough to know the happiness that money brings. I like knowing each month that I have money to pay my bills. I like the thought of knowing if I want to take a vacation, I can. I like the thought of paying myself first because I take what I want and then everyone else gets what's left. Not very much. Sounds like the government. You work all your life to pay taxes. Then when you're old, you have to rely on the government to take care of you. I personally have higher hopes and dreams for myself than to live off the government. I like that Robert Kiyosaki is a spiritual man, and clearly a Christian. It's evident in his writing. I totally agree when he says, I've learned that without a strong reason or purpose, anything in life is hard. I also laugh every time I hear uneducated people bash on the wealthy. They make stupid comments like, I'm not interested in money. Money is of the devil. They misquote scripture screaming, money is the root of all evil. Like Robert, I do find it funny when people make these statements. Then, the very next day, they wake up at the crack of dawn to rush off to a job to work in exchange for money. If money is of the devil, then they're eating from the devil's dinner table, in my opinion. I do like the reality of life, though. We are all born naked with nothing. We are all responsible for our own lives. You can say, well, some people are born in the money. And while that may be true, they still must learn to keep it. You don't have to be rich to gain knowledge. Even poor people can go to the library and check out a book. Knowledge can be attained by anyone willing to put forth some effort. Give, and it shall be given. Without a doubt, Robert is quoting Malachi chapter 3. Both his rich dad and poor dad taught him to give. While his rich dad paid tithes and offerings, his poor dad gave of his time and knowledge. It's important to understand about sowing and reaping. Overall, I've learned once again that it's not biblical to be lazy and poor. As a matter of fact, it would probably be safe to say that being poor by choice is a sin. I think I have to agree with Mr. Kiyosaki when he says, Our greatest assets are our minds and our time. This book has helped me to realize that I am on the path to achieving wealth and riches in my life. However, I must always be willing to give back and help others along the way to achieve success in their own lives. I must always put God first and build on a solid foundation. Overall, Rich Dad, Poor Dad has helped me to learn we must develop a mindset to win in life before we are brainwashed to believe the lie that it takes money to make money. Financial freedom is created by knowledge and knowing the difference between assets and liabilities. Success in life is more of a trained thought process than simply working to earn a paycheck. Success isn't free, and at some point